Welcome back. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now. Today's topic is who are you? Looking at aspects of identity and underscoring the fact that that is a choice, an ongoing, fluid series of choices that we're free to make. Today's topic is inspired by too often I'm talking to folks who tell me that they need to find themselves. And so I point at them and laugh and say, well, I found you. Now what happens? So I want to get into talking about all of this. But first, I want to ask you to please message me any questions, comments you have, whether they're on topic or not. Always want to hear about what's going on in your recovery. Be a resource and be helpful in any way that we can. Would love to have you jump on to any of the streams. If you haven't already been over to our Sober Now's Facebook page, head over there and give it a quick like. It'll give you notifications about future live streams and other content that we're creating. So let's get into it. Let's get past this technical difficulty. Okay, we're good to go. So, like I said, it drives me crazy when folks tell me they're trying to find themselves. It drives me crazy when they tell me that they're trying to figure it out. Figuring it out is something you do inside your head, typically alone, and that's just a really bad idea. There's a handful of really important aspects of identity that are not a choice, and I just want to acknowledge that. So race, sexual orientation, ethnicity, there's a handful of things that we're born into, and those are important. They matter. But through the course of recovery, what we have is progressively a lifestyle, a lot of choices, an infinite number of choices, and we're rebuilding and creating a life that is, as my friends in 12-step programs say, second to none. Recovery is a process, we know this, but it's also expansive. It creates new possibilities as we go. We start by moving away from self-destruction, gaining stability. It's very congruent with Maslow's hierarchy. We start with the most basic aspects of life. We're moving away from things that are destructive towards us and towards greater stability, greater safety. We're moving away from high-risk behaviors and towards a lifestyle that is manageable and sustainable. Every achievement, every milestone, every step we take on a path of recovery, whatever that is to you, we achieve greater health, new possibilities are created, and again, we want to stick with the basics. So our basic life needs being met is what's most important, that we achieve, whether that's detox or medicated assisted treatment or some pathway away from the destruction of addiction towards greater basic life need fulfillment. We work towards achieving safe and secure housing. We seek employment, and progressively we get to invest in relationships and careers. The key to our growth typically is having lots of support, having fellowship, and I always emphasize this, having a ton of accountability. Being mindful of what our goals are, pursuing them in a way that is incremental, that is manageable, but ensuring that we have a sense of where it is that we're heading and we have people holding us accountable for that. Progressively, this alone transforms our identity. We become someone greater than we were. We need to approach this pragmatically and not philosophically, and that's why the whole idea of trying to find yourself is really something that's misguided. Developing identity is pragmatic and ideally spiritual. You get to choose the most important qualities, the most important characteristics, behaviors, and a lot of these are things that we might take for granted. But we get to choose dignity. We get to choose accountability, dependability. You get to choose your work ethic, but more importantly, your beliefs and values. And progressively, we get to ensure that the way that we live is congruent with what we truly believe and truly value. Too often, our choices are based in what it is that we're trying to avoid, and too often, the person we're trying to avoid most is ourselves. So all of our growth and healing is contingent upon mindfulness, having an awareness to be connected to self, and progressively connected to other healthy people on similar paths, good people in recovery, and ideally to a power greater than ourselves. We often find that what we're drawn towards is what's most familiar to us, and people, places, and things that are comfortable are usually not healthy. This is one of the biggest changes that we make through the course of recovery. When we're gravitating towards the familiar, we're gravitating towards the type of people maybe that we grew up with or that we used with. And so, of course, what we need to move towards is something that is unfamiliar, and that's awkward. We tend to be very socially anxious. We tend to be uncomfortable with new ways of relating. Embracing vulnerability is terrifying for us. There's a lot of change that's happening here. And to kind of highlight that, one of the questions that I'm most often asked for people who have achieved a good stretch of recovery and they're looking to return to dating, and they ask me, how do I know if somebody's a good person for me to get to know, to date, or to pursue a relationship with? And I'll immediately say, well, listen to your gut. That's the number one piece of advice that I always give. And if you're listening to your intuition, that's going to guide you really well. I encourage folks to separate what they know in their head, their heart, and their gut, because too many of our choices are made from fear, and that's your heart. Too often we are limited by shame and guilt. That's also your heart. Overthinking is what happens when your heart hijacks your head. But listening to your intuition and instincts is what I mean when I say listen to your gut. So if you're considering dating somebody and you immediately feel comfortable with them, run. That may sound counterintuitive, but I have found it to be true. If you're immediately comfortable, it's because there's something familiar and you have a strong sense of how that person wants you to be. If you meet somebody and you just feel terribly awkward, stick around. There's a really good chance that what's happening is something that's unfamiliar but is potentially very healthy. But again, being able to listen to your instincts and intuition means being connected to yourself. It also requires that you're noticing the times where you're doubting yourself. Self-doubt is one of our most common character defects. It's something that plagues us. We doubt ourselves because we hate how things feel. We doubt ourselves because something is disappointing, or we don't like a particular outcome, and rather than being upset or perhaps recognizing that other people, places, and things have let us down, we have a tendency to redirect everything at ourselves and blame ourselves for how things turn out. A huge part of developing identity occurs when we learn to accept suggestions and compliments. Needing validation, praise, recognition, these are all basic, healthy human needs, but too often we kill ourselves to earn things that we're then too uncomfortable to receive. So even when we come to see that our image of self is distorted, there's a great deal about ourselves that we want to change. When we have good, supportive people in our lives, they're going to give us feedback about ourselves, and we need to be open-minded about that. It doesn't mean that we have to agree. It does mean that we have to allow other people to have their own opinion, and we need to, sure, maybe question their motives, but if someone's offering you some recognition, they're appreciating something about you, listen to your gut as far as what their motives are. And if they're a good person who's not trying to manipulate or get something from you, then just write it down somewhere, or be open to the possibility that what they're saying is true, and ideally we develop a greater appreciation for ourselves as we go. Again, all of these things are choices, and I always favor simplicity. So quite often what I have found is that in order to take in good things that are offered to us, things that people appreciate about us, we have to be willing to let go of pain. We have to be willing to let go of past resentments. We need to make room to take in good stuff. Ideally, as we grow, we connect to something larger than ourselves. And That certainly doesn't have to be anything of a religious nature or a god per se. It can be the acronym for God, Group of Drunks, which is a reference to my friends in AA. It can be nature, it can be a group of people who support you, it can be anything that's more powerful than you that helps you to stay sober and achieve your goals. My experience is the more that you're open to those encounters, those experiences, as you allow for spiritual growth, it happens very naturally. And I think the most uncomfortable thing about spirituality is that, first of all, it's a personal choice. Nobody gets to tell you what is true for you and what it is that you should believe. But secondly, I think we need to treat spiritual growth as though it's a grand adventure. The weirder my life gets, that's proof that I'm growing spiritually, and the more I grow spiritually, the weirder my life gets. So I'm very mindful of the fact that the best things that are in my life today are not there because I was so clever that I identified them and went out and achieved them. My business is a good example of that. I employ a lot of really super talented people, and I'd love to tell you that I'm so clever that I went out and found them all, but that's just not true. My higher power, their higher power, brought us together, and so I get to be in the company of really super talented people because I was open to making connections, because I was willing to stick around when things were awkward or uncomfortable, and just to see where they led. And the surest sign that I'm moving in the right direction in my life, especially spiritually, is when things just fall into my lap. So most of the things that are actually the things that I most love and most love doing are not a product of my will. They're not a product of me making some great plan. In fact, the things that I most enjoy doing, things like Sober Now, things like being an instructor at one of my local universities, things like mentoring and the volunteer work that I get to do. None of these are things that I sought out. All of them were things that were just kind of placed in my path, and I was open to exploring them, and they contain possibilities that I couldn't have imagined. But the more I was open to new people, new places, and new experiences, the more satisfying and fulfilling my life became. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make in trying to transform their lives is that they're focused on the idea of happiness, which honestly, it's a lousy goal. I would much sooner pursue fulfillment. I would much sooner pursue passion, purpose, things that are not fleeting. Happiness is an emotional state that comes and goes. Joy is something that endures and sticks around. So I think being mindful of who it is that we're becoming, who it is that our higher power most wants us to be, what are the things that truly matter to us, what are the relationships and experiences that we're pursuing. I don't want to make plans for those. I want to be open to whatever the current moment contains. I want to be open to what we too often view as coincidences, things that just keep happening or things that drop into our lap. I was at a meeting recently and I heard someone express that coincidences is your higher power maintaining anonymity, which I thought was a really cool way of thinking about that. So again, I want to encourage you to be mindful. Journaling is one of my go-tos. It helps you to quite literally get on the same page with yourself. And when we think about what is the process or how is it that you actually get to know you, this too is a place where I'll encourage you to use the Keep It Simple system. If you know how to do something for someone else, then you know how to do it for yourself. It works exactly the same way. So if you wanted to get to know someone, you would spend time with them. You would have conversations with them. You would ask them important questions about themselves, about their lives, about their beliefs and values, about what are their dreams, what are their passions, what are the things that they most want. Asking those same questions of ourselves, I think, is very simple to understand. it's not hard to do, except that answering those questions creates responsibility. When you don't know what it is that you want or need, then you don't really feel an urge to pursue it. When you do know, then there's a responsibility that follows. You have to come through for yourself. You have to be willing to make those investments, face those fears, work towards attaining those goals. Okay, I'm going to pause just for a moment because I want to check in on some of the streams. And like I always say, we very much welcome your questions and your comments. Dermot, thanks for writing in. Very nice to hear from you. From Ireland, but living in the UK. Can I meet others in this live stream? I'm really struggling with isolation, 18 years in recovery, but my feelings are just coming back. I got isolated from people, and I find it hard to meet the right people. Thank you, really, for sharing that. I appreciate that greatly. I hope that you will connect with others in this live stream. Sober Now's Facebook page is a place where folks are welcome to post and make those connections. Recovery is really draining to work alone. We are people who need people, and during the time of this pandemic, of course, that is all the more taxing, all the more difficult to achieve. So making those connections online is a great start. It's a wonderful way to connect with people all around the world. I have been really grateful for the connections that I've made to folks online because it really is a global community, and it gives us the chance to connect with folks that we otherwise would never meet. So just doing a real quick check of the rest of the streams. Okay. There's something about connecting with folks online that might feel a bit awkward because obviously this is a person that you haven't met, but it might allow you to take some greater risk by sharing where you're at, what your needs are, what are the challenges, what are the things you're going through right now, what hurts, what sucks. What are the things that you find isolation causes for you, Dermot? What are the memories that surface? What are the feelings that you experience? And what would you say to a friend in your shoes? Making connection is such a huge part of this, and we can do that through online meetings, we can do that through online coaching, we can do that ideally by fostering new friendships. And my hope is that as you go to make those new connections, you will progressively feel comfortable being yourself. But of course, in order to be yourself, you have to have some reasonable idea of who that is. It's okay to be a mess. It's okay to be unsure. It's okay to just be lonely and seeking connection. We know so many things that we learn readily through early recovery, and yet they may be things that are hard to feel or hard to believe. We know that we don't judge people by their past, but too often we do judge ourselves by the worst things that we've done. Your past does not define you. You are not a mystery to unravel. You're free to notice the things that you believe that are not true. For folks in recovery, some of the most common false beliefs that we encounter, the idea that you're not good enough. For too many of us, that is a lifelong challenge. It's something that we learned as children and are working to unlearn. Whenever someone says to me that they believe they're not enough, I'll immediately ask, for who? By what standards? Because too often these ideas are really just feeling states. They're not things that are logical in nature, and that's okay. When something isn't rational, that just means it's emotional in nature. Too often, it's interesting to me that while we fear that we are not good enough, we also fear that we are too much. We believe ourselves to be a burden or an imposition. And my experience is that's really just fear preventing us from making new connections. And if we are open to suggestions and open to the truth of good people, we will progressively discover things that we have believed about ourselves that just aren't true. The idea that we are unlovable is sadly very common in recovery. Our addiction and the things that we did to get drugs do not define us. Our past abuse does not define us. How we were treated by our family of origin, the past traumas that we've endured, these things do not determine our worth. Your worth is precious. Your worth is valuable. And progressively, not just investing in yourself, but also allowing others to invest in you is what helps us to grow collectively. And I want to help us do that as a community, locally, globally, and it's a big part of why Sober Now was created. So please do, Dermot and all others, please do post in Sober Now's Facebook page. Please do connect with me. I always love hearing from folks and happy to answer questions or be helpful if I can. Jim@sobernow.com is the easiest way to connect with me. Please also check out our YouTube channel. Sober Now on YouTube has, maybe a couple of hundred videos by now that are completely free. Just check them out. A whole lot of different topics that are germane to different forms of recovery. And of course, please check out our website, sobernow.com. Eminently affordable. We are now a subscription service for under $15 a month, and that gets you access to 2 of our home study programs. The first one is for folks who are looking to enhance their recovery or maybe start their recovery from substance use disorder. And the second program is for people like myself who identify as affected others, looking at how we navigate having a loved one in active addiction. How do we care for ourselves? Because, of course, addiction doesn't just affect the person who's in active use, it affects everyone that's connected to them. So, please connect with each other, connect with me, and please take excellent care of yourself. Through the course of this pandemic, things have been a little extra trying, and it's easy for us to be isolated. So I hope that we're seeking to make connections and that we'll continue to invest. Please join us next week. We're here each Thursday at noon Eastern Time, and look forward to